Welcome to yet another episode of the HSS seminar series. I'm Salman. I teach politics here at LUMS. And today we have Dr. Jahanzeb Baloch, who is a postdoc fellow in the history stream of the HSS department. And he's going to take us through a very interesting journey of resistance in Balochistan during the colonial era. So when I started reading this paper, his chapter, I realized, I started feeling that this book, which we hope will ultimately come out in a year or two, will be a book that will break many myths that exist about Balochistan, the way we think about Balochistan's resistance as something very new, very contemporary. It is not that case. And for me, the most interesting thing about this research is the contribution that it makes about the history of resistance, not just in the subcontinent, but very specifically about Balochistan and the dimensions that he highlights, including armed resistance and resistance through literary means. So without taking too much of your time, I'll invite Dr. Jahanzeb Baloch to present his talk. He's going to take about 45 minutes and then followed by my very brief comments, because I'm guessing that a lot of people will be interested in asking a lot of questions to Dr. Jahanzeb Baloch about Balochistan's history. So my comments will be followed by an open house Q&A session where you can ask questions, and Dr. Jahanzeb will be here to answer them. So over to you, Dr. Jahanzeb.
Thank you. Thank you very much, LUMS and HSS team. I'm really honored to have this opportunity to talk about Balochistan, history of Balochistan, the resistance history of Balochistan during the colonial period. And my talk will be basically on three dimensions or three parts of the resistance in Balochistan. I'll be starting with the militant resistance, then to literary resistance, and then we will be just moving towards the political resistance and the emergence of political parties in Balochistan. I would start my talk with the event, and I will invite all of you to just imagine 1911 Delhi Darbar. The Queen is visiting this place. The Khan of Kallat is invited there. During the passing march, Khan placed his hand on his sword, giving sort of, according to Baloch tradition, respect to the Queen, and the British Raj and its administration actually feel that Khan might have threatened the Queen while keeping his hand on the sword. So they stage a drama. The A.G.G, assistant to Governor General, which is called the Commissioner in Balochistan's context, asked the tribal elders of Balochistan that when he will be coming back to Sibbi, and then from Sibbi railway station to his residence, they are going to have a cart without horse, and the tribal elders will be dragging their cart from railway station to the residency, so that letting people to be told that what actually their state or their status in this particular colonial stage or colonial state is actually what it is. Over there, obviously there are few tribal elders who are called Sardar. They refuse to do so, but majority of them actually drag the cart physically. There a person is standing by the name of Mullah Mazar. Mullah Mazar is actually a poet, and he writes or he narrates this event in his own poetry. I'll be just reciting two sentences from his poetry, and then I'll be translating this into English as well. He says, Chikka bevasinga Sardar Chikka, Kaumana nango namu se mishtiton awar Chikka. Drag helpless Sardar, drag this cart, along with the dust, the honor and respect of your family and Baloch nation. He's a very common man. Nobody actually knows about him. But his poetry about Sardar becomes very famous, and that is called Lat Saab Na Baggi. Baggi, you know what is Baggi. And Lat is a mispronunciation of the word lard. And then this becomes that much famous in the entire Baloch society that the Sardars officially write to the British authorities that this person should be banished from Balochistan. And he has literally been banished to the Sindh and he was never allowed to come back to Balochistan again. This story gives a very striking idea. We have always been hearing that Sardar is an absolute authority. Whenever a Sardar would utter a word, the entire tribe will just bow down, and all these stereotypes. And this is reminding you a Sardar empowered by Sundayman. This is 1911. So Sardari system is on its best, but we see how a common man criticizes Sardar while collaborating with the British Raj. Actually, the resistance in Balochistan starts with the emergence of the British Raj in Balochistan from First Anglo-Afghan War, when for the first time the Indus army is being moved from Ludhiana to Kandahar while touching parts of Sindh and entering into Balochistan. If I tell you the stats of Indus army, it is very interesting. Almost 21,000 soldiers, regular and irregular, 38,000 camp followers, more than 30,000 camels. They are just going for a picnic, you must say. A lot of bag and baggages, families. They are thinking that the gardens of the Kabul will be just like the Kashmir and all that stuff. But once they enter into the barren lands of Balochistan, their problem actually starts from there. There is no food available even for the common small type of caravans, not to speak of thousands of people just moving in. And once they enter into the Dar-e-Bolan, the problems become to their apex. The Baloch tribes start looting them. The word loot I'm using in a particular way because we generally think that all of nowhere Baloch started to think that this treasury has arrived and everyone is there to just have his part of the party. Actually, this army was savaging everything which was coming on their way. So basically, the Indus army were forcefully taking away the small available food with the people of Balochistan, and it was a retaliation by the Baloch tribes against the Indus army just to take their own food and take revenge as well. From there, the military resistance starts. Then we know about the First Anglo-Afghan War and what happened with the British Raj. During that period, again the British army once again storms the Kalat fort itself, killing Mir Mehrab Khan along with his tribal elders. One of them happened to be a non-Muslim as well, Diwan Bachalmal. So then the Baloch, in particular mainlands of central Balochistan and northern Balochistan, start again raiding, attacking, types of activities, just like guerrilla warfare they actually do. And then slowly and gradually the British state formation starts in Balochistan after 1854, when they go for a close border policy, conquering Sindh in 1843, Punjab for 1849, and then just closing the door in Balochistan, just thinking that if they are doing some sort of thing, then they will go for expeditions, for punitive expeditions, all sort of things. What actually is missing in most of the textbooks written on Balochistan is the forced migration of the Baloch tribes from Balochistan into Sindh. They were basically banned to come back to their home, especially the Domkis, the Murri, Bukti, and Jakhranis. The entire families were just taken away from Balochistan. They were given lands in Sindh. They were resettled there. And even if anybody was going to tell some sort of giving information about these tribes that they are going back at home, they were rewarded. So from there, a double type of resistance actually starts. Bijar Khan Domki, one of the persons from Kachi Bolan, gathers a lot of tribal people along with him, starts raiding, and then he just disappears into the mountains, into the small villages. People hide him from the following British army, and he becomes a heroic figure. If you talk about Jacob's biography or Charles Nipper's sort of conquest of Sindh and his documents, you will see a lot of sort of stories about Bijar Khan, which they actually say Beja, the mispronunciation of the name. The second phase of the military resistance in Balochistan starts when, after 1858, British Raj decides that Khan is an absolute authority in Balochistan. the Sardars are just as notable, while in actual Baloch tribal structure, Khan was first among the equal rather than an absolute authority. They subsidize Khan with 50,000 rupees per annum. Khan establishes his own royal army, and then a power struggle starts between Khan and the Sardar, which actually culminates into 1870s when Sandeman comes with the idea of alleviating Sardar as the real power in the tribes rather than Khan himself. Until First World War, small and big wars go on between the British Raj and the Baloch tribes. There are a number of clashes. It is suggested that more than 100 times the Baloch tribes have went for the armed resistance against the British Raj until First World War. After the First World War, during the First World War, the British Raj asked for men or money to just fill his war machine for the First World War. The Mari tribal elder actually refuses both of them, and then once again there is a type of punitive expedition against the Maris into Kolu and Kahan. But until now, the British Raj has established itself. Sandeman system is going very nicely. Sardars have already become part of the collaborative type of system which British Raj had actually launched in Balochistan, and whatever we talk about Sandeman system, that is actually functioning very properly in Balochistan. So there starts the second part of the resistance. Just starting from the from the emergence of the first Anglo-Afghan War, basically the Baloch poets, the Baloch writers have always been producing a lot of literature. In the 1870s, there are two types of literature we can see. One is called the Maktaba-e-Durkhan, which is a counter-religious movement in Balochistan established in the 1860s when the Baloch tribes, about which generally we think that they were illiterate, had no idea about studies or all sort of things. The Maktaba-e-Durkhan, with his founding head Mullah Fazil, actually established this counter-missionary movement where they translate the holy book into Balochi and Brahvi, then ask the people to develop sort of poetry about it, go into the masses, have sort of preaching to them. In this particular way, they are able to just counter the religious or the Christian colonial missionary programs. So when in 1908, for the first time, the Bible is translated into Balochi, then the Holy Book was equally translated into Balochi, and that was published from Lahore. And the people who came over here, they narrate in their story that the very last time, and remember they were Puritan type of Islam, people, followers who actually are much more impressed from the Deoband ulama. They came into Lahore, they were just running short of money. They stayed in Data Darbar, they got free food from there, collected money, and then published this holy book and went back there to distribute it among the people. Obviously, majority of them were not that much educated enough to read Balochi or Brahvi, but they have one contribution at their account that the script, the Balochi and Brahvi script, have actually been drafted by the Maktaba-e-Durkhan and its followers. I had a copy of one of their translations about the Balochi literature, and once I was just having it at my home, my own mother just thought that, you know, the pages are very much illuminous from the side. If you close the book, you will see illuminated pages. My mother, and if you just open the book, you will see a lot of Arabic type of text with having all these ihrab, zir, zabar, all that of sort. So my own mother actually thought that it might be the holy book, and she was just scolding me that why you have kept it on the table. So, you know, this is how they have actually produced the Balochi script and the Brahvi script. Obviously, there were a lot of British intervention in that as well. So from there we see, first if we go through and see the literary text and the resistance literature in that, this always starts with the praises to the God, Islamic touch, and then praises to the people who have actually martyred in the battlefields fighting against the British Raj. And almost every small piece of the literature has a portion where collaborators are always cursed. they are demonized, they are asked from their doomsday, and most interestingly, they are alleged that they are the one who have actually are responsible for the miseries of the common people. So if we deconstruct the literary text in Balochistan, there is a double type of resistance. One, obviously against the British Raj. Secondly, the Sardars, the native officers, and all that people who have actually been helping the British Raj for running their state machinery. The third part of the resistance in Balochistan have actually started with the dawn of the 20th century. Abdulaziz Kurd comes up with a student political organization by the name of Young Baloch, inspired from the Young Turks in 1909. And Balochistan, if I tell you, was governed by 3 different laws. There was a princely state of Kalat, there was British Balochistan, where British civil law or direct government system was in place, and then there was a tribal agency, Kolu, Dera Bukti, and part of the Zob Valley, which were actually governed through the FCR. So there were different kind of laws implemented in entire Balochistan. There was only the part of the British Balochistan where actually a political type of activities were allowed, but in British Balochistan, in Khanate of Kalat, and in the tribal agencies, there was a strict ban on having any kind of political activities going on. So that was the first part in Balochistan's history, that they were having a type of clandestine political organization, but that too of a student level. Then in 1920s, basically there was for the first time an organized political party in Balochistan by the name of Anjuman-e-Ittihad Balochan wa Balochistan. In this particular political organization, the basic idea was a type of secular nationalist type of having political party where not only the Baloch, but the Pashtuns, the settlers, the non-Muslims were given proper seats in that particular thing. And most of the time we hear the names of Yusuf Aziz Maksi, Gul Khan Nasir, Abdul Samad Khan H.G. and Yusuf Aziz Kurd. These all political leaders were actually part of this particular machine. They were trained in this particular political organization, and they have been doing their politics from this particular platform. And then in 1835 Act, actually things started to change, and let me tell you, there was an all India conference in 1830, and most of these conferences were happening either in Jekmabad or in Karachi, because the political activities were comparatively banned in the Balochistan. So there was an all India Baloch and Balochistan conference, and they went for a political demand, charted out a demand of charter of demand, and then presented to the British Raj. What is most interesting about this charter of demand is the first point, and to the world of our imagination, it was about the female education, that there must be schools. And remember, there were limited schools already in Balochistan, very few schools in Balochistan, but among them the political leadership in Balochistan was thinking that the female should be educated in Balochistan. So generally we think about a tribal structure, a conservative society, a very frontier type of region where people would deny, in fact, educating the even male students, whereas in 1930 the demand was for the female education as well. So that actually speaks that what actually was going on and what actually have been written in our history books and all sort of things. And the second demand in this particular thing was a ban on Walwar. Walwar is a particular type of ritual, not generally being done in the entire Pashtun communities, but few of the Pashtun tribes actually do this, that this is when at the time of the marriage, the boy's family is supposed to pay some sort of money to the female family members, and they will make sort of not dowry, sort of things to give their daughter. Even this particular thing was banned by there was a demand to be officially banned, this particular sort of thing. So you just imagine that how much female voices were tried to be brought into this political narrative of Balochistan. And in 1835, the great earthquake, the one of the leading political figures, Yusuf Aziz Maksi, died in that particular thing, and this is the same Yusuf Aziz Maksi who had actually written the Faryad-e Balochistan, and he was the one who was outspoken against the British Raj and the Khanate of Kalat and a lot of other people. So there was always a war between the Sardar and the common people in Balochistan. In fact, he has written a type of political pamphlet by the name of Shams Gardi. Sir Shams was the Prime Minister of Khanate of Kalat, an Indian bureaucrat who actually was working with Khan of Kalat, and Yusuf Aziz actually wrote about against him and mentioned a lot of things in that particular political pamphlet to show the people that how much Sir Shams was actually being autocratic towards the common people within the Khanate of Kalat. After the 1835 Act, there were split basically in the political parties in Balochistan because in 1835 Act suggested that now the princely states have sort of their own political parties as well, and then there was a birth of Kalat State National Party in Balochistan, specifically in Khanate of Kalat, and there was another party by the name of Anjuman-e-Watan. Generally, if we just see the history of political parties in Balochistan, people would always associate Kalat State National Party with the Baloch ethnic or nationalist group, and Anjuman-e-Watan with the Pashtun nationalist group. But the interesting part of the story is that the General Secretary of Kalat State National Party was Faiz Muhammad Yusufzai. The word Yusufzai itself suggests that who he actually was. And the General Secretary of Anjuman-e-Watan was basically Abdulaziz Kurd, again suggesting that who actually this particular person was and how much ethnicity, the division between Baloch and Pashtun ethnic or nationalist group were actually at functioning. During this, the Kalat State National Party was, there were two groups in Kalat State National Party. On the one side were the hardliner led by the Ghaus Bashk Bezinjo, whose speech is always quoted when it comes to the 1947's episode in Balochistan. He was always, or his group was always there, as we can say, hardliners who have actually wanted to have an independent state rather than becoming part of the Pakistan project. And on the other hand, there were other groups who were type of more tilted towards associating themselves with Pakistan along with some conditions, and that was actually led by the Ahmadiyar Khan himself, the Khan of Kalat. So there were again some tussles between the Khan, Sardar and the political leadership of the Kalat State National Party. Similarly, the other part of the Balochistan's political party, which was Anjuman-e-Watan, was more inspired from the Congress party. They were talking more about the having sort of relation, they were against the binaries of the Muslim and Hindu type of thing. This was actually led by the Abdul Samad Khan A.G.G as well, and according to his own biography, he was associated with the title of Gandhi of Balochistan as well. And then there were basically in 1840, the first Muslim League political party emerged in Balochistan, establishment by the Qazi Isa, and those who were actually in this Muslim League political party, there again was a tension between Jamalis, the Sardar families, and the Qazi Isa as well. And there were some sort of Jamaat-e-Islami type of small groups in Balochistan as well. So Balochistan's the second decade and third decade in Balochistan's history is full of political party formation, protests. They were using all kind of media. In 1837, Samad Khan A.G.G established his own press in Balochistan, which actually talks about the issues in Balochistan, the problems in Balochistan. And if you see the manifestos of these political parties, and you check out the political manifestos of the present day political parties, there are striking similarities. They are asking for quotas in the job. They are asking for sort of having educational, health and other type of reforms in Balochistan, still which we actually see is going on in Balochistan particularly. I think I must stop here so that we can have some sort of discussion maybe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jahanzeb, for this very useful insight into the history and dynamics of resistance in Balochistan against colonialism. And it becomes very clear as we read this fascinating chapter on resistance that a lot of contemporary resistance can actually be traced back to what happened, to what started happening in the 1850s or even before that. Uh, what really struck me was the engagement that different Baloch groups developed with religion as part of their resistance against colonialism and the post-colonial state of Pakistan. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the Kalat State National Party. I mean, it was really surprising to see that Kalat State National Party's manifesto, its its major demand was to establish Sharia law in Balochistan. Uh, as a party representing nationalism in Balochistan, demanding Sharia law in Balochistan, and then subsequently rejecting Muslim League's demand that Balochistan should accede to Pakistan on the basis of a common religious identity. So, how did that happen? Why did the KNSP decide to, you know, change its narrative, which very specifically highlighted the use of religion in 1937, and then changing that strategy to resist post-colonial state expansion? Do you want to go?
I think it will be better if I respond individually. Otherwise, okay. Yes, basically, generally we think that Balochistan at that time and even today, this is very much cut off from the rest of the politics of Pakistan or of South Asia or of world at large. It will be interesting to note that in 1917, when the Russian Revolution had actually happened in there were few of the comrades under the leadership of Misri Khan. They actually went to the Russia, so it suggests that they were actually having type of understanding about the Russian Revolution and the socialism and Marxism there. Secondly, yes, they were demanding this particular Sharia because of the dominant discourse in South Asia associated with religion. Obviously the Muslim League, and there were the people who were actually part of the Muslim League and all sort of things. Yusuf Aziz Maksi's close friends were basically the Johar brothers. He used to visit them and they were very much connected with these people as well. So as I have mentioned that even in the early literary text, if you see all the major texts start with the praise with the God and part of a religious text in that. So it was very problematic to negate the dominant discourse of Islam in Kalat State National Party. First, that was basically a type of demand for them to have more people along their side. Secondly, yes, they were disagreeing with the Muslim League, but their idea was about the Muslim League based on the idea having a common state with Pakistan on the basis of religion. They were not negating, it was not an atheist type of political party. Yes, it was very much part of the Islamic that discourse as well. But within that particular discourse, they had, even if you see the speech of Bizinjo in 1947, he suggests that if Islam is the only requirement to become part of Pakistan, then Afghanistan and Iran should also be part of the Pakistan, actually telling the story that yes, people live, they have a Muslim identity, but they can have their own identity as well. So that was a nationalist, I must say Islam plus nationalist type of ideology, which actually Kalat State National Party had. Secondly, it was purely for the first time that the people of Balochistan were encountering not only a different type of people, but altogether a different religion. I started my talk with the Maktaba Durkhan episode, and the people who were actually working for the counter-missionary movement had actually sort of idea in their mind that Christianity is going to dominate the common tribes. So they cannot get rid of Islam directly, they cannot say about these things. Yes, they were using tactfully different kind of political strategies. So if that was a need of Islam, they were going for that. Otherwise, most of the time their attitude was nationalism based on ethnicity.
I mean, I'm trying to understand that they started using religion in 1937, and before 1937, a lot of resistance had already taken place, including armed resistance. So, how do you think? How would you explain that their decision to use religion to cement their politics was an outcome of what happened in the late 19th century and in the earlier 20th century, even before the Russian Revolution. So we have in the 1850s tribes resisting, you know, the British colonial government individually. That this is one tribe. We have this one tribe resisting the Baloch, the British, and at some other point there is a different tribe resisting the colonial government. At some points, we have some tribes who were resisting previously, but now they are collaborating. So, do you think using religion was one way of bringing all of these different struggles into one framework uh, to project their politics, nationalism against the colonial state, knowing that the politics, the nature of politics is also changing in the subcontinent, that identity politics is hardening, and this was a logical response from within Balochistan to augment its own position within broader colonial system. So, in short, to what extent do you think that the KSNP's choice to project Sharia was an outcome of previous 70 or odd years of resistance?
I mean, obviously, this is the time that the dynamics of having a political organization was emerging in Balochistan itself. So it was type of getting inspiration, what's happening around, and obviously the dominant discourses, they were being part of it as well. The Ahmadiyar Khan himself, who actually established this Kalad State National Party at the earlier stage, was thinking to use it in another way, and he was one of the architects of this having this political party. So obviously they were using all the available tools at their hand. So religion was one of the very important factors. So it was not something like very much cooked or very much well established system. It was going through different stages, being influenced from the politics around, and incorporating all the available discourses which would give them type of legitimacy and leverage to the people who could just get together on its platform.
It's interesting that you mentioned intertribal dynamics leading up to the development of different political parties in the early 20th century. So I was wondering that when you talk about that the British colonialism started to arrive in Balochistan in mid 19th century, and some tribes start their resistance individually without necessarily collaborating with each other. But then we see the same tribes becoming collaborators, and you use this theory of resistance plus collaboration to tell us the processes that led to the formation of colonial state in Balochistan. So, to what extent do you think, and how would you explain that this constant shifts from one tribe being a resistance group and at another time the same tribe becoming a collaborator? These shifts were shaped by not just by the imperatives of colonialism itself, but also by the imperatives of intertribal relationship. That is, when one tribe starts resisting, it impacts another tribe and it shapes its own relationship with the colonial power. So how did that happen? What were those dynamics? How did those tribes interact with each other within this framework of resistance and collaboration? So what I'm saying is that even if we put the colonial state aside for a moment and highlight the intertribal dynamics, what did those look like, and how did that shape the choices of tribes about their decision to resist or collaborate?
Yeah, this colonial project actually starts with the first Anglo-Afghan War in 1839 and the physical engagement of the British administrators with specifically with the tribes directly actually comes with the Sandman system, and this is a process of more than 30 years, I must say, starting from 1840s to 1870s. So a lot of things have actually developed during these 30 years, and specifically Sandeman was an administrator at the Punjab side of the Baloch, Suleiman or Baloch areas, and they had an understanding of the Baloch tribalism, because if you see the Baloch tribalism, it's more Turco-Mongolian tribal structure, having hierarchies, socially defined hierarchies, where starting from a family head, culminating into a Sardar, having a part of social support from the tribal structure itself, and that particular social structure was actually helping them to have a political leverage as well, and this is what actually Sandeman have used for its benefit, I must say, in Balochistan's context. Here actually the small thing Sandeman have made, it's not small, it has actually reshaped everything, the power dynamics in Balochistan, which was basically to give them three basic things. Number one, a permanent pension or a source of income, and in Balochistan's context, with the few exceptional areas, the monsoon is not there, the agricultural land is comparatively very problematic, having cyclical droughts and all sort of things. So Balochistan's specific problem and was having a permanent source of income, which having sort of pensions to the collaborative Sardars have permanently settled that problem. Secondly, it was a tribal policing system, having a levies where the Sardar will hire and fire the people, the British Raj will pay for it, and then the only duty of that particular area was to maintain law and order, very much colonial project and all sort of thing. Number three, the Jirga system, a political assembly. Jirga is not a Balochi term actually, it's a Pashto word, but again having a Jirga system where small issues within the tribes, among the tribes, would be solved by the tribal customs and the tribal elders themselves, and having different stages of this Jirga system culminating into the Shahi Jirga, which would happen twice in the year. So in a way, this was a complete scheme of financial and political a plan giving a particular type of tribal structure in Balochistan, where obviously the Sardar becomes one of the classes, pure economic classes, and a political class rather than a social class, having its support from the tribe. Now he had arms men with him, having a financial support, then having political power in the shape of the Shahi Jirga and the Jirga system. So this was some sort of thing that which happened around an experience of more than 30 years, not only in Balochistan, and I must say this system was sort of thing which was globally available if you think about in terms of the African and the Malayan tribal structure, which Mehmedani actually talks about, and the indirect governmentality, where we can see that it was a global project, applied nicely in Balochistan, worked properly for the Baloch because of having already tribal structures in Balochistan. So in this way, those who were getting the opportunity to become part of this grand political and economic system were the one who were actually having sort of collaboration with the British Raj, and the others were actually resisting this, and plus the British itself as well. And as I have told you earlier, that the Khan was the first person who got the subsidy in 1854, and from 1858 to 1870s there was a civil war among the Khan and his Sardars because of this shift in the power dynamic. So whatever the external shift dynamic was actually coming into Balochistan, and the tribes were just observing a restructuring of their power relationship, they were actually resisting this. So if we understand tribal structure in that grand scheme of having a Sandeman system, then we will be in a position to understand that how people were resisting intertribally and against the Khan or Sardar as well.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that people had intertribal dynamics of resistance. So I don't think this is part of this chapter, but I'm guessing that it is part of your book, where you talk about how the sorts of conversations that would take place between or amongst tribes that will lead them to develop intertribal coalitions of collaborators. and intertribal coalitions of those who resisted. So perhaps you could explain a little bit about what those conversations were within or amongst tribes, and what were the common frameworks that they would use to develop those coalitions in the 19th, from mid 19th century onwards, before something called Baloch identity became a relevant reference for building coalitions. So what were those conversations? How did those coalitions developed against
I mean, if
the
you talk
colonial
about
government?
the collaborative system in this particular area, the Sunderman system actually starts in the Punjab side of the colonial border, and there is another colonial border called the Sindh side, and the geography of the Punjab side is of having people in the upper land and the lower lands, same tribal people having relationship with each other, having most of the cases the same tribal identity as well. And then these tribal people who were actually living on the Daman, if we specifically talk about, they had relationship with the people tribes who were actually living inside the hills of the Kohe Suleiman, specifically the Mari and Bukti areas. They already knew a lot of dynamics. So these people from the Punjab side, the tribal Baloch people who were actually living in between the plain lands and the mountain, were the first people who actually interacted with the Sunderman, who actually became part of his grand scheme. Then they connected the Mari and Bukti areas, and the whole scheme of Sunderman system starts actually from there. Now, when this was actually going on, a counter movement was equally going against it. There were other people who were not happy. I'm not suggesting that there was only a tribal jealousy, that one cousin is supporting the other cousin is just going against. No, it was not like that. Obviously, people had their own issues, their own domestic problems. But along with that, there was a large scale movement going on, sometime using religion as a one of the factors, other time using tribal code as another factor, even third time having a common ethnicity among themselves. If you see, I have a chapter on that as well, but if you see these interactions, it starts from individual tribal people having sort of collaboration and resistance as well, and then it connects with the other tribal people having their common political economy was being disturbed, which actually I mentioned about the Bijar Khan Domki's episode. Now Domki is a particular tribe, and among his comrades there were not only the Domkis, there were a lot of other people, and because of having an inter-tribal relationship of this resistance, the British Raj decided to just have a mass migration of the Buktis, Jakhranis, Umranis, Domkis and other people, just taking them from Balochistan, resettling into the Sindh, just because of one simple reason, that they collectively resisting the British Raj under the umbrella of Bijar Khan Domki. One particular individual having a lot of other tribal group, bringing them on common platform. Obviously, he was having a very early stage of a political, a nationalist type of thing. Obviously, he was not clear about it, I must say. Somebody is coming from the outside, becoming part of its economic zone, having or snatching everything, and people are just trying to resist to protect their livelihoods. In a later stage, they are developing this common identity among themselves, seeing as Raj and his collaborators as the equal enemies, and then having a type of solidarity, type of relationship, type of ideology, I must say, which could culminate into the ethnic or nationalist type of ideology or organization, which culminates into the political party formations.
Thank you. I think a lot of us will be interested in knowing the extent to which this history of collaboration and this history of resistance is still relevant in the contemporary Balochistan. I mean, when we talk about Balochistan, we cannot, like, kind of forget or try to forget what's happening today. We do have collaborators and groups resisting the Pakistan state. So, how much of that can be linked and traced back to those intertribal dynamics that shaped Baloch resistance against colonialism?
I mean, to a great extent, tribalism has become irrelevant, I must say, because tribalism was very much powerful in the central and northern Balochistan. The southern Balochistan has its own social dynamics, but their tribalism itself, which is Makran, becomes irrelevant in that particular case. So if we think that still the same things are going on, I must say that it will be a bit problematic, because now the things are comparatively more extensive, and your own work actually suggests a lot that how post-partition period have actually pushed people towards a particular type of having ideology and clash with the state of Pakistan itself. But I personally think in the contemporary context, tribalism has long been buried. Now there is a full-fledged type of political dynamics with understanding of a lot of ethno-nationalist ideologies, where if somebody is going for the parliamentary politics or otherwise has a full-fledged understanding, a map in mind, they're mature enough to understand. Almost it has been 100 years now. So what my thesis actually deals with is an early stage, giving a background, just providing sort of roots that how actually the story starts. And after 100 or so years, the things have evolved a lot, and a lot has been improved so far.
Yeah, so I don't have many questions, but just last question, that when you talk about that your book talks about and traces the genealogy of resistance in Balochistan, could you perhaps speak a little bit about the types of resources that you used, archives, which resources you used, how did you collect them, what sorts of challenges that you may have faced? And I mean, my personal experience has been that whenever you want to research on Balochistan and you want to collect archives, you are in a troubled territory already. But what was your experience, and what sorts of resources you collected and used? I mean, I see that you, in this chapter at least, you refer to colonial archives and documents, writings produced by the Baloch people themselves. What else? And I mean, first of all, how did you collect
I mean,
these
yes,
archives, and what other?
your part of the job was a bit tough, but mine was comparatively easy because I was working on a colonial period and you were actually working from in a post-colonial period. So first of all, yes, I have I had actually no problem as far as if I compare both of our experiences. I had no issue as you were having actually. Secondly, yes, I have gone for the archives. I have collected archives from the NDC, Islamabad, Punjab Archive, Sindh Archive, Balochistan Archive, British Library, SOAS, and Scotland as well. When I was doing my PhD dissertation and I was in SOAS, I come up with an idea that yes, I'm just doing one side type of history, because I'm always talking about the archives. If there are problems, I'm criticizing archives, disagreeing with archives, but still it is archive in one or the other form. Then a few of my colleagues, I must say, and I must acknowledge them, James Karen was one of them, who actually told me that how literature can be used an alternative source of history writing. So from there I got the idea and I started working on the native literature produced in Balochi, Pashto and Brahui, and luckily I could speak, I can read and write in these languages as well. So I collected these poetries back at home from these particular these areas from the university and the personal collections of the people. Then I translated these literary sources, and actually that gave me an idea that literature is the source of looking into the society in its true sense when a historian is actually working. An archive can give you an official canvas to look at, but literature will give you an access to just deep dive into the society. As I started with my talk with one of the poetries from a very common man written in Brahui, 1911. He actually is, if you just go through his entire that piece of poetry, you will find that he is talking about the not only just cursing the collaborators. Again, he's talking about the class differences, he's talking about the miseries, he's talking about the common man being not only poor, but dying because of the different disease and droughts, but the one who are part of the British company and it's all luxuries, having a beautiful elite type of life, while the people who is supposed to represent is dying out there with hunger. So that actually gives you an understanding that how you can see through the society what is actually going on in the society. That actually helped me. I used poetry, folk tales, and few of the elderly people who have actually witnessed the very, very last of the periods of these British Raj. And interestingly, I would always ask them questions, as you might have heard about, that if you ask them کہ جی وہ وقت اچھا تھا یا ابھی, تو they will always say کہ انگریز کے پاس سب کچھ تھا, ظالم تھا لیکن انصاف تھا. And I would always counter ask this question کہ اگر ظالم تھا تو انصاف کیسے تھا. And obviously they would compare the justice system of colonial period and post-colonial period, and they were of opinion کہ جو ان کا تھا رگڑا تھا لیکن کچھ نہ کچھ تو تھا. But now, as we see our judicial system and all the justice we have around, so that actually gives a comparative study as well, that gives an understanding that how the people who were actually experiencing the colonialism, how they were thinking about this. And secondly, I would discuss with my colleagues as well, who think that colonial development is still a development, کہ روڈ آ گیا, سڑک آ گیا, پتہ نہیں کیا کیا آ گیا. And then I would ask question, counter questions, all that sort of things, کہ کیا آپ کے لیے تھا, do you really have this, کہ سب کو ایچیسن میں موقع ملتا تھا. ایچیسن چھوڑیں, کسی کو پرائیویٹ اسکول, برٹش اسکول میں کیا سب کو موقع ملتا تھا. So then you will have a counter narrative as well and sort of thing. So yes, I have not struggled but enjoyed a lot.
As you were speaking, I was reminded of this wonderful essay by Ranjit Guha, The Prose of Counterinsurgency. And what better way to reconstruct that prose than using these resources that you have used. I end my comments and questions here, and I think it's time for the audience to ask their questions to Dr. Jahanzeb.
آپ کے جو سوالات تھے, جو آپ ڈسکشن ابھی چل رہی تھی کہ کولیبریشن ہو ریزسٹنس کے اندر باقی ریجنس کے اندر, ٹالپور ایرا سندھ کے اندر تھا اس وقت, اور اگینسٹ برٹش راج ٹالپور وہاں فائٹ کر رہے تھے. تو سندھ کے اندر ایک کریکٹر جو فریڈم فائٹر کے طور پہ ہوشو شیدی ایک ابھرتا ہے وہاں پر, اور ایک سلوگن وہاں پر ایک فیمس ہوتا ہے جو کہ سندھ کے لیے ہمیشہ ریزسٹنس کی ایک نشانی بن جاتی ہے, اور وہ سلوگن ہوتا ہے کہ مرویسوں مرویسوں سندھ ندیسوں. بیسیکلی دیٹ واز ان سرائکی لینگویج. تو ان ایڈیشن ٹو دیٹ کہ یہ ایک اس پہ بھی کچھ روشنی ڈالیے گا پلیز آپ.
ویل سر, میں ضرور ایڈمٹ کروں گا کہ آئی ہیو مائی لمیٹیشنس, کیونکہ میرا جو ایریا آف ریسرچ رہا ہے وہ اسپیسیفکلی بلوچستان رہا ہے. سندھ میں نے ٹچ ضرور کیا ہے, لیکن اس طریقے سے سندھ کو میں نے پڑھنے کی کوشش نہیں کی. میری انڈرسٹینڈنگ آف دا ٹالپور بہت ڈفرینٹ ہے جو میں نے ان کے ڈاکومنٹس یا باقی چیزیں دیکھی ہیں. یس, کامن لوگ وہاں پہ ہر کا آپ تحریک اٹھا کر دیکھ لیں, یا جیسے آپ نے مینشن کیا ان کا بہت سارے اور لوگ ہیں. اگر آپ سندھی پوئٹری دیکھتے ہیں اس میں بھی بہت سارا آپ کو ریزسٹنس کا بہت سارا مادہ ملتا ہے. لیکن جو ٹالپور خود ہیں, ٹالپور ایک تو کمزور تھے اس اسٹیج پہ, دوسرا جو رنجیت سنگھ کا پنجاب تھا ان سے ان کو اچھے خاصے تھریٹس بھی تھے. ایون جو انہوں نے ایک طرح سے ٹریٹی کیا تھا برٹش راج کے ساتھ, تو ان کا پہلا ڈیمانڈ یہ تھا کہ رنجیت سنگھ کے جو کلیمز ہیں سندھ کے کچھ علاقوں پر وہ نہیں ہونے چاہیے. اور دوسرا ان کا یہ بھی تھا, اور جو کہ برٹش راج کو بنیادی طور پہ تھا, کہ جی شکارپور کو وہ ایک ایسی جگہ بنائیں گے جو کہ ایک ٹریڈ ہب بنے گا. جیسے میں اپنے ٹاک میں بتایا کہ اتنے سارے لوگ اٹھا کر جب یہ جا رہے تھے, انڈس آرمی موو کر رہی تھی, تو اس کے پیچھے ریزن بھی یہی تھا کہ ان کے ذہن میں آئیڈیا یہ تھا کہ یہ افغانستان میں جا کے بیٹھ جائیں گے, اس پورے خطے کو کنٹرول کریں گے, شکارپور اس کا سینٹر ہوگا, وہاں سے دریائے سندھ میں بڑے بڑے شپس چلتے رہیں گے, سینٹرل ایشیا کے پروڈکٹس یورپ کے مارکیٹ میں وایا انڈس اور شکارپور اینڈ انڈین اوشن پہنچیں گے, اور بڑا زبردست قسم کا ایک اکنامک پلان ایسٹ انڈیا کمپنی, تو وہ ایک اکنامک پلان بنے گا, اور یورپ سے آئے ہوئے سامان یہاں پر دوبارہ لے کر جائیں گے. سندھ امپورٹنٹ تھا, اور فرینکلی اسپیکنگ وہ تو نائپر خود بھی ایڈمٹ کرتا ہے کہ ٹالپوروں نے بڑا سپورٹ کیا لیکن ہم نے زیادتی کیا. تو ظاہر ہے ٹالپور کمزور تھے اور وہ پاور ایلیٹ تھے اس زمانے میں، اس لیے وہ اس طریقے سے تو نہیں کر سکے، لیکن جو عام عوام تھی، جو عام لوگ تھا، وہ سندھ کی جو ہسٹری ہے اٹس فل آف ریزسٹنس.
تھینک یو ڈاکٹر جہانزیب. میرا سوال بھی بلوچستان سے باہر ہے، سو آئی ایم سوری ان ایڈوانس. لیکن میں ایکچولی آئی واز ویری اسٹرک بائی سم تھنگ یو سیڈ وچ واز you sort of gestured in your talk to how these were very fluid identities. جو آپ کالات نیشنل پارٹی میں جو پریزیڈنٹ جو تھے وہ یوسف زئی تھا، اینڈ دین یو آلسو شوئنگ اس جو بلوچ ٹرائبس جو ایکسپیل ہو کے سندھ میں پھر سیٹل کی گئیں. سو you trace a very fluid kind of moment in history where there's a lot of exchange. اور اس sense میں I wanted to think more about something that Dr. Salman also said, which was it's striking that they were pushing for Shariat state in the 30s. But 30s mein, the other place where they were pushing, the other people who were pushing for similar things were the Fakir of Ippi. And اس ایریا میں بھی یہ ڈیمانڈ چل رہی تھی, framed specifically as a challenge to the British rule. So I was just maybe hoping that you could, just to invite you to speak a little more on, maybe were there conversations, do you think, that were happening? Was there a larger discourse? Because this part of, Western South Asia is not, what kinds of exchanges, what kind of conversations were happening within the context of resistance to British rule. We don't really see there's not a lot of conversation or a lot of, work, scholarship on that. So maybe I could invite you to speak on that if possible.
My answer will start from the very same response which I just gave to Ashok صاحب. اصل میں جو پرابلم ہے ہمارے ذہن میں ایک بہت ہی عجیب و غریب قسم کا اسٹیریوٹائپ ہے اباؤٹ ٹرائبلزم, اباؤٹ افغانستان, اباؤٹ فرنٹیئر, کہ جی وہ پتہ نہیں واٹر ٹائٹ کمپارٹمنٹس میں رہتے تھے. بالکل بھی ایسا نہیں ہے, پہلی بات. دوسری بات یہ ہے کہ یہ ایک پورا سلیمان بیلٹ ہے جس میں وزیرستان, دوسری طرف سے بلوچستان, پھر ان کے آپس کے جو انٹریکشنز ہیں, اور آئی مسٹ سے کہ جو ریڈز ہوتی تھیں بیسکلی برٹش راج پہ, چاہے وہ بلوچوں کی طرف سے ہوتا تھا یا ایٹ اے لیٹر اسٹیج ان 1880s جب مندو خیلوں کا جو پشتونوں کا ہوتا تھا ان کاکڑ ریجن آف زوب, تو وہاں پر اکثر ریڈز کے بعد ایون ان 1880s when Lord Bruce was there for having a military operation in the Pashtun belt, تو وہاں کے جو لوگ تھے ان کو پناہ بنیادی طور پہ اسی کولو کے اور جو بلوچ ٹیریٹری ہیں ان کے اندر یہ وہ ان کو ملا تھا. اسپیسیفکلی آئی ہیو ناٹ سین اینی ڈاکومنٹ, میری اپنی لمیٹیشن ہے جس میں یہ بتا سکوں کہ فقیر آف اے پی اور ان کے درمیان کوئی انٹریکشن ہوتا تھا یا نہیں ہوتا تھا, لیکن یہ ضرور ہے کہ ان کے آپس میں تعلق بھی رہا ہے, وہ بھی رہا ہے, کیونکہ زوب کا جو ویلی ہے جس طریقے سے ڈیرہ غازی خان از کنیکٹڈ تھرو بلوچستان وایا دی جو فورٹ منرو ہے, بالکل اسی طریقے سے جو ٹوچی اور گومل ہے اس کے ذریعے سے کنیکٹ ہوتا ہے کے پی ود بلوچستان. آن دس سائڈ وی ہیو ڈیرہ اسماعیل خان, اور جو سنڈیمن فورٹ ہے زوب میں, اس کی جو اگر آپ تھوڑی سی ہسٹری دیکھیں تو اٹ واز بیسکلی ون آف دی اسٹریٹجک فورٹس in that part of Balochistan to just have a look of this particular connection, mountainous connection between KP and modern day KP and Balochistan. So obviously people were interacting with each other, and obviously Islam was a very dominant discourse. اور 1920s اور 30s کا جو پولیٹیکل اسلام کا جو پوری دنیا میں ایک فارمیشن تھا, ساؤتھ ایشیا میں اس کی فارمیشن تھی, بہت سارے لوگ اس میں چیزیں تھیں. سو obviously مجھے خود ذاتی طور پہ لگتا ہے کہ یہ جو انفلوئنس ہے یہ اس سے انفلوئنس آ رہی تھی, they were very much connected.
بہت بار ملٹیپل گروپس آ رہے تھے, جیسے انجمن اتحاد بلوچان یا KSNB تھے, ان کے جنرل سیکرٹری یوسف زئی تھے, یا اگر انجمن وطن تھے تو ان کے جو جنرل سیکرٹری تھے وہ ایک بلوچ تھے, عبدالعزیز کرد تھے. تو مائی کوشچن واز کہ ڈو وی کنسیڈر دس ایز اے روٹ آف a larger Balochistan identity before the formation of the modern day Balochistan province, where Baloch and Pashtuns kind of mix together, or like when the province kind of forms, do they go their separate ways and do they influence each other as they're going forward?
I mean, yes, at the very early stage I have mentioned کہ 1930 کا جو انجمن اتحاد بلوچاں و بلوچستان کا پارٹی ہے اس میں it was an amalgamation of both of the ethnic groups plus the non-Muslims living in Balochistan. وہ تمام اس میں موجود تھے. جو سمد خان اے.جی.G صاحب نے اپنا پریس بنایا اس کے لیے ڈونیشن سب سے زیادہ خان افقالات نے دیا. ایتھنیسٹی واز ناٹ اے پرابلم ایٹ دیٹ پارٹ آف دی ہسٹری آف بلوچستان. ایتھنیسٹی if I talk about پشتون اینڈ بلوچ بائنری وہ 1970 کے بعد ہمیں اس کی ایمرجنس اور اس کے وہ تمام چیزیں نظر آتی ہیں. ادھر سے ظاہر ہے جو ڈائنامکس ہیں وہ الگ ہوتی چلی گئیں اور پھر جو پاکستان کے بننے کے بعد جو پولیٹیکل ڈائنامکس تھیں یا جس کی جو ریکوائرمنٹ تھی جس کی وہ چیزیں تھیں اس پہ پولیٹکس کا جو ڈسکورس ہے وہ کمپلیٹلی الگ ہے. کالونیل پیریڈ میں میں نے حالانکہ جو 1901 کا 1911 کا جو سینسز ہے اس میں اسپیسیفکلی صوبوں کے لیے جو ایک حصہ دیا جاتا تھا آئیڈینٹی کا وہ دیٹ واز لینگویج. یو آر سپوز ٹو ٹیل وٹ لینگویج یو اسپیک ایکچولی. کالونیل اس سے تو یقیناً تھا, اس میں اچھا خاصا تھا, لیکن جو لوکل لیول پہ لوگ تھے مجھے نہیں لگتا کہ جو ایتھنک ڈویژن ہے وہ کالونیل پیریڈ میں اتنا شارپن تھا, اتنا زیادہ تھا. اینڈ دس از واٹ مائی ایکچولی آرگومنٹ از.
Sure, thanks. I just had a couple of comments. Ek to just stemming from the last question, I'm sure you might have done it in your larger work, but just to highlight, I think one needs to kind of also look just at the word Balochistan, kyunki iska bhi use, it's a very modern construct. Usse pehle Balochistan ka lafz matlab hai hi nahi. So اس کو بھی اتنی آسانی سے میرے خیال میں یوز نہیں کرنا چاہیے. اس کے اندر بھی بڑے پیچیدگی ہے, اینڈ اسپیشلی اباؤٹ idea of a Baloch land or a Brahui land as compared to the Pakhtuns also. So I think that's one important thing. Secondly, I also think one has to be careful using the term resistance. اور یہ میں اس لیے کہہ رہا ہوں کہ when we look from today back, بہت زیادہ چیزیں آج کی زاویے میں ہم دیکھتے ہیں, right? And the key is to understand how they saw it at that time rather than what we see it now. And I think that's a very important thing to remember when you're looking at these movements, because I can give a random example that at times a raid is just a raid and is not resistance against anyone. At times a raid is a resistance against someone. But it's important to be aware and to be able to differentiate that. Because اگر ایک بلوچ ٹرائب دوسرے کے خلاف ریڈ کر رہی ہے تو ہو سکتا نہیں ہے کہ وہ کوئی رزسٹ ہی کر رہے ہو سکتا ہے بس they have something that they want, it could just be a monetary physical thing, whatever. So I think that one has to be kind of very careful about when using the term resistance, because وہ آج کل تو ایک ٹویٹ کر دیتے ہیں تو لوگ تو کہتے ہیں I'm doing resistance. So I think one has to be very careful کہ اس کے کانٹیکس میں کیا ہے. تھرڈ چیز جو میں سوچ رہا تھا کہ یو مائٹ ٹاک اباؤٹ, بٹ مے بی اٹس دیئر ان دا لارجر ورک, that a lot of the Baloch, or I would say Kalat kind of idea develops in the 1930s as something different than an Indian identity, a South Asia, جو احمد یار خان کا پورا آرگیومنٹ تھا کہ جی ہمارا تو اس ملک سے کوئی تعلق ہی نہیں ہے. And that is why the Kalat State National Party begins to pick up. That is why he gives money to it. So that's a very important element, because یہ ایک بڑا interesting قسم کا ethno state idea ایک conceive ہوتا ہے, which is quite rare as compared to the rest of the princely states. And I think that if you interrogate further will actually help in understanding کہ بلوچ ideas کس طرح سے develop ہو رہے ہیں اور کہاں وہ جا رہے ہیں. And just the last bit, وہ جو آپ نے مطلب you mentioned a couple of times کہ Kalat State National Party کا, I think most people who have worked on this, I think the only key is to say کہ it was in Kalat where a majority are Baloch and Brahui, rather than کہ کوئی ایک بندہ بھی نہیں تھا, because it's never 100%. نہیں so وہ میں یہ کہہ رہا تھا کہ you mentioned کہ ان کے جو جنرل سیکرٹری تھے who was Yusuf Zai, but I'm saying کہ most people who talk about this saying it was a Baloch party, I don't think anyone means it was 100% Baloch اور ایک بھی نان بلوچ نہیں تھا. It means majority Baloch. مطلب I'm just thinking of like the first people وہ دینا سویڈلو پال ٹائٹس وغیرہ وہ جو لوگوں نے کام کیا ہے, and Ricardo Bridelli also, کہ I don't think they meant 100%. تو I think they meant کہ جو, اور اس کے نام میں ہی ہے Kalat State National Party, so Kalat کے اندر majority تو بلوچ اور براوی ہی ہیں. So I think That's a minor point, and I think उनका चूँकि focus बड़ा clearly वहाँ था in terms of the state itself, that kind of defined what kind of politics they were doing. And as I was saying earlier, I think it's very important to link it to the ambition of the Khan. I think that's very, very important. Just the last thing on the Islam concept
out of time.
was one line.
There's other questions.
One line. ये जो religion की बात कर रहे हैं, one of the key is कि अगर आप 15 अगस्त 1947 का proclamation देखें of the Khan, he in fact says that he is going to impose Sharia because they think Pakistan is going to be a secular country and not impose Sharia. So there is another dimension to this too.
I think you have mentioned a couple of things. Thank you for that. Lekin to me, I must say that the word raid itself, it's a colonial construct. Secondly, as when we talk about Afghanistan, there is always a concept of, if history of Afghanistan, there is a concept using the Foucauldian approach of power and knowledge relationship, and the Elphinstonian work and the Elphinstonian episteme, which is modernly used as having a type of knowledge about a particular people and then just imagining that people are actually in the same way, so they have been for hundreds and thousands of years living in the same way, is a colonial construct, and through that all the policies are coming. And this is actually the problem with the archives here. In a similar way, in 1808 there was a person by the name of Henry Puttinger, and in my work I have actually borrowed this term of Elphinstonian episteme, and I have used as Puttingerian episteme, if you can say that. I mean, I have mentioned that the first interaction of the colonial Indus army coming into Balochistan is just thinking in the mind that they don't need food because on their way they will be having the food. So these guys are coming first, entering into the villages, having all sort of things, whatever they are having, and somebody very weak, obviously if you just imagine 21,000 soldiers, 38,000 camp followers with a lot of camels, a lot of other beasts, animals and all sort of things. A huge army is just moving. On their way they are taking everything, and the people who are very mildly, very, I must say, humble way, just paying back in a way if they are weak enough because of the non-availability of water, becoming weak, non-availability of food, and then the tribes are getting opportunity to take away what they have actually have brought for themselves. I must say that it's a counter type of resistance, I must say. It's not raid, because we generally think that tribes, as you have mentioned, that one tribe just thinks that for the sake of entertainment, let's have a raid. It was not like that, because yes, there were animosities between the tribes, there were wars between the tribes, but along with these wars, there were some tribal code of conduct before the British arrival. Later stage, when they already were thinking that this gentleman is part of the collaborator, colonial collaborator scheme. So in that particular thing, yes, they were doing a lot of such kind of acts as well. So I think, yes, that was a limited type of resistance, but still they were resisting because they had the only small amount of food available for themselves. And I have mentioned that this is the era then already Balochistan is witnessing a type of drought, where actually the Khan was responsible to provide the food, and the Khan had no authority on these tribes as well. Secondly, there was a drought. Khan repeatedly mentioned, if you see the archives at that times, that we don't have that much enough food or soldiers to protect you guys, but still if they are coming and then there are problems and people are just going and doing with in a humble way, I must say that if you see it from any lens, it's supposed to be resistance. And a similar way, if they are going into Afghanistan, doing a lot of things there, and the people are just getting angry, having an Afghan type of killing all the British people in Kabul and the history we see there, I must say that is again a type of resistance. Yes, the definitions might be different. The terms might be different. They might be called freebooters, and I just wonder in a environment like Kutchi having 50+ temperature, people will even wear the boots and they use the term freebooters, looters, raiders, all kind of colonial demonizing the noble savage was going on. So to me that seems like that. And secondly, as you have mentioned, that Ahmad Yar Khan and the Kalat state, that ideology of having a state, yes, in 1910, if we see the works produced by the colonial Raj, two are the areas, Nepal and Kalat. They are categorically mentioned that in the princely states, their status is a bit different. And then in the Darbar, correspondence actually suggests that they were actually given the difference status by the colonial state itself, which actually Salman's work in post-colonial Pakistan a little bit talks in that theoretical framework as well, that giving a state type of labeling of the particular people. I think I have made my point.
آپ نے شروع میں مینشن کیا کہ 3 ٹائپ آف جو ہے نا
ریزسٹنس،
ایک تو نہیں ریزسٹنس نہیں، آپ نے کہا کہ ایک تو ڈائریکٹ برٹش رول ہے، ایک ٹرائبل رول ہے، ایک پرنسلی ٹائپ ہے. تو 3 ٹائپ آف ایک ہی بلوچستان. ہم جسٹ ونڈرنگ کہ اس میں جو ریزسٹنس تھی، جو بنگئی صاحب ورڈ جو نام بھی یوز کریں، کچھ جو ریزسٹنٹ موڈ تھے، جو ویریشن تھی، کیا پرنسلی اسٹیٹ میں الگ تھی یا ٹرائبل میں الگ تھی یا ڈائریکٹ رول جہاں تھا وہ الگ ہے؟ وائی ایم آسکنگ یو کہ جتنا بھی آج کل اسکالرشپ آ رہا ہے پرنسلی اسٹیٹ پہ، دین دے کمپیئر ود پروونسز. جو 6 انڈر پرنسلی اسٹیٹ تھی، پروونسز تھے، وہ 3-4 چیزیں آ رہی ہیں کہ جہاں پروونسز تھے وہاں کیا ہوتا تھا، کوئی لینڈڈ جینٹری ہو، ٹرائبز ہو، ان کو بینیفٹ دیا گیا اور کاسٹ سسٹم کو پروموٹ کیا گیا، ان کی ڈسکریمنیشن. اور جہاں پرنسلی اسٹیٹ ہے نا، وہاں جتنی بھی ریلیجیس مینارٹی تھی یا ایتھنک مینارٹی تھی، ان کی ڈسکریمنیشن ہوئی. جنرلی یہ جو اسکالرشپ آ رہا ہے. تو ہم جسٹ ونڈرنگ 2 تھنگز ہیں کو آپ کے لیے کہ پہلے کے جو ریزسٹنس موڈ ہے یا آپ بتا رہے ہیں کہ وہ ڈفرینٹ تھی، ویدر اٹ واز اے سافٹ، ویدر واز اے ہارڈ. ہارڈ میں سافٹ مین کہ کوئی لٹریچر ہے، فولکلور ہے، پوئٹری ہے، کوئی ان میں یعنی ویریشن ہے، کیونکہ اتنا بڑا بلوچستان ہے کہ آپ اس کو جنرلائز چھوٹا، مجھے تو ایسے لگ رہا ہے. سیکنڈ آ جو کہ ٹل پریزنٹ، اس کے بعد کیا ہوتا ہے کہ اگر جو اتنا بلوچستان میں وائلنس ہے، کیا اس میں ویریشن ہے پریزنٹلی کہ جہاں پرنسلی اسٹیٹ تھی یا ڈائریکٹ رول تھا کہ وہاں ابھی انٹرنچ ہیں ٹرائبل سسٹم، یا جو وائلنس ہزارہ کے سارے کہ وہ اس میں ہم کوائٹ لنک کر سکتے ہیں کلونیل پیریڈ سے پریزنٹ کے جو تین ڈفرینٹ ویریشن ہے یا سملیرٹی ہے سورٹ آف؟
جی بالکل ایگزیکٹلی. جہاں پہ جو کلات اسٹیٹ تھا وہاں پہ کمپیریٹیولی جو اگر آپ ملیٹنٹ ریزسٹنس کی بات کریں تو وہ صرف 1898 میں یا اس سے پہلے پرنسلی اسٹیٹ جو کلات بنی ہے وہ سنڈیمنائزیشن کے بعد بنی ہے، جو 1870 کی دہائی ہے. اسپیسیفکلی اگر میں بات کروں تو جو ٹریٹی آف گندمک ہوتا ہے سیکنڈ اینگلو افغان وار کے دوران، اس کے بعد ایک سسٹم لے کر آتے ہیں جس میں خلات اسٹیٹ کو ایک پرنسلی اسٹیٹ کی طرف لے کر جاتے ہیں. پھر اس کے بعد جو ٹرائبل ایجنسیز ہیں وہ بالکل ایک الگ ہیں، اور اس کے درمیان سے ایک لیزڈ لینڈ اٹھایا جاتا ہے جو بنیادی طور پہ افغانستان اور پرشیا کے ساتھ جو زمین کنیکٹ ہوتے ہیں بائی لینڈ، وہاں سے انہوں نے اس کو ایک چھوٹا سا اسٹرپ بنا کر اس کو برٹش بلوچستان کا نام دیا. ایک تو بالکل یہ صحیح ہے کہ اس میں 3 قسم کی سسٹم ہیں. ایک پرنسلی اسٹیٹ آف کلات ہے ود اٹس فیڈریٹنگ یونٹ، جس میں مکران، لسبیلا اور خاران آتا ہے، جس میں کسٹمری لا ہے. خان از آن دا اسکرین، اس کے ساتھ باقی جو لوگ ہیں وہ بھی اس کے ساتھ اسی طریقے سے چل رہے ہیں. یہاں پہ چھوٹے بڑے جو ملیٹنٹ کلیشز ہیں کمپیریٹیولی اسٹیٹ آف کلات میں کم ملتے ہیں ہمیں اس پیریڈ میں. زیادہ تر جو ہمیں جو کلیشز ملتی ہیں وہ بنیادی طور پہ ان ریجنز میں ملتی ہیں جہاں پہ ڈائریکٹ برٹش سسٹم ہے یا جو ٹرائبل ایجنسیز کے نام کے طور پہ ملتی ہیں. جیسے میں نے کچھی کا بتایا، اب کچھی 1840 کے دہائی میں اس وقت یہاں پہ کلوز بارڈر پالیسیز تھا. برٹشرز ور ناٹ انٹرنگ انٹو دا بلوچستان. پنجاب اور سندھ کے بارڈر پہ دے ور سپوز ٹو اسٹاپ دیم سیلوز. اب اس کے بعد if they would come and enter into بلوچستان تو most of the time it was a punitive expedition. اب اس punitive expedition کے خلاف لوگ لڑتے بھی تھے، کرتے بھی تھے، اور پولیٹیکل پریشر کریٹ کرنے کے لیے وہ مین لینڈ پنجاب اور سندھ میں ریڈز بھی کرتے تھے. اور انٹرسٹنگلی جو کچھی ہے وہ ڈائریکٹ برٹش ایڈمنسٹریشن میں آتا تھا بعد میں، جس کو برٹش بلوچستان کہا جاتا ہے، اور جو مری بگٹی ایریاز ہیں جسے وہ پنجاب میں انفلٹریٹ کرتے تھے، وہ ٹرائبل ایجنسیز کا وہ بنتا تھا. تو یہاں پہ جو ریزسٹنس ہے، جو نیچر آف اسٹیٹ ہے، نیچر آف لا امپلیمنٹیشن ہے، نیچر آف ایڈمنسٹریٹو اسٹرکچر ہے، نیچر آف راج اینڈ ٹرائب ریلیشن شپ ہے، اسی کے رسپانس میں ریزسٹنس بھی آ رہا ہے. ایک تو یہ ہے کہ 3 الگ اگر گورننس سسٹم ہیں تو 3 الگ قسم کی انگیجمنٹس بھی ہیں. تو یہ تو صرف 1898 کا ایک ایپیسوڈ ہمیں ملتا ہے جس کو گوک پرش کے نام سے ایک واقعہ ہے جہاں پہ مکران میں ہوتا ہے. ادروائز پرنسلی اسٹیٹ میں جو معاملات، جو جھگڑے ہوتے تھے وہ بٹوین سردار اینڈ خان آف کلات ہوتے تھے، اور وہ موسٹلی کلیش ملیٹنٹ بھی ہو سکتے تھے، ادروائز بھی ہو سکتے تھے، ٹرائل بھی ہوتے تھے. 1892 میں خان آف کلات واز سنٹینسڈ کہ جی آپ کسی کے مرڈر میں انوالو ہو، اس کو ہٹایا گیا. ہی واز بینشڈ فرام بلوچستان ایز ویل، وہ ایک اپنے ہی ایک ٹرائبل ایلڈر کے ساتھ. تو ان کے جو ڈائنامکس ہیں وہ بالکل الگ ہیں. یہاں پہ اسٹیٹ فارمیشن، اسٹیٹ اسٹرکچر الگ ہے، لیگل سسٹم الگ ہے، تو یہاں پہ انگیجمنٹس بھی الگ ہیں. تیسری بات جو فرینکلی اسپیکنگ میں شاید وہ میپ لے آتا تو ہم زیادہ اچھے سے اس کو کر لیتے. بنیادی طور پہ جو ٹریڈ روٹس ماڈرن، میں صرف ایک چھوٹا سا کہوں گا، جو سی پیک کے ٹریڈ روٹس ہیں، بیسکلی دیز آر دا سیم ٹریڈ روٹس جو خانیٹ آف کلات میں برٹش ارائیول سے پہلے سینٹرل ایشیا، افغانستان، مڈل ایسٹ اور لارجر انڈین کانٹیکسٹ کو جو کنیکٹ کرتے تھے. یہی بولان، مولا، مین لینڈ جو ہے کلات، مکران اور سی، اور پھر یہی روٹ کنیکٹ کرتے تھے افغانستان اور تمام راستوں کو. تو سی پیک بنیادی طور پہ انہی روٹس کی ریوائولزم ہے. اب اسی طریقے سے جب آپ بلوچستان کے اپنی جو سو کالڈ ڈیولپمنٹ ہے اس کے ساتھ اگر آپ بلوچستان کو کمپیئر کرتے ہیں، جو ناردرن بلوچستان ہے وچ واز پارٹ آف دی برٹش بلوچستان، اس میں کمپیریٹیولی ڈیولپمنٹ زیادہ ہوا. اس میں کمپیریٹیولی ظاہر ہے ریل آیا، ایڈمنسٹریشن آیا، اسکول، ہاسپٹلز آئے، اور جو باقی کا بلوچستان تھا وہ کمپیریٹیولی انڈر ڈیولپ رہا، جو کہ موسٹلی پرنسلی اسٹیٹس کے ساتھ ہے. لیکن بلوچستان کے اگر اسپیسیفک کانٹیکسٹ میں بات کریں تو اسٹیٹ آف کلات جو تھا وہ کمپیریٹیولی، ظاہر ہے وہ جو دوسرے تھے وہ بہت زیادہ ڈیولپ نہیں تھے. آئی ایم ٹاکنگ ان اے کالونیل کانٹیکسٹ. اس کے اندر وہ تھوڑی سی ان کی ڈیولپمنٹ رہی ہے. تو ان کے ڈائنامکس آج بھی جو ناردرن بلوچستان ہے، سینٹرل اور جو سدرن بلوچستان ہے، ان تینوں ریجنز میں آپ کو ویریشنز نظر آتے ہیں تمام چیزوں کو لے کر. ماڈرن ٹائمز میں کمپیریٹیولی جو سینٹرل اور ناردرن بلوچستان ہے اس میں ٹرائبلزم زیادہ پاورفل رہا ہے، اور جو سدرن بلوچستان ہے وہ ہسٹوریکلی جو مکران بیلٹ ہے اس میں ٹرائبلزم اتنا اسٹرانگ نہیں تھا، اس میں ٹرائبل اسٹرکچرز اتنے پاورفل نہیں تھے. ان کی اپنی ایک سوشو کلچرل ڈائنامک ہے جس میں ایکسٹینڈڈ فیملی سسٹم رہا ہے، تو ان میں تھوڑا سا اسپیس زیادہ تھا. جیسے گوادر میں آپ نے حق دو تحریک دیکھا، خواتین زیادہ امپاورڈ ہیں کمپیریٹیولی. بہت ساری ایسی چیزیں. بلوچستان کو ایک یونٹ سمجھنا پرابلم ہے. بلوچستان کو ہم اس کے مختلف، جتنا جیسے آپ نے خود مینشن کیا جغرافیکلی بڑا ہے، کلچرلی بڑا ایک ڈائیورس ہے، تو اس کو سمجھنے کے لیے وی نیڈ اے لینس جس میں ایٹ لیسٹ انٹرنل جو ڈائنامکس ہیں اس کو سمجھنے کے لیے وہاں کے اپنے وہ ہونے ضروری ہوں.
One thing I observed was that you said that Islam played a key role in this entire situation, whether it was to push forward an objective or to regain a religious identity. But if we consider the present time, the rising separatist insurgency is due to the involvement of the jihadists and Islamist militia in the area. So what do you have to say about that? How has Islam played a role long term?
Well, that's very, I must say, eye-opening for me that if these Islamists are part of the separatist movement in Balochistan. I don't think so. I mean, I have never heard about. Yes, there are problems. We most of the time we see there are some sort of issues. There are sectarian issues. There are other issues. And the people who claim to have a religious identity and operating in Balochistan, I must say that they have a very, very different understanding and different agenda and different kind of things that has nothing to do with the internal politics of Balochistan. That is something that which is very strange, very new, and which is very famous for Baloch. And I must say, a lot of people, starting from Salman, asking this question that why Baloch are asking for a Sharia in their political manifesto is that Baloch are generally a religious, I must say. they are comparatively more secular than having a religious identity and subscribing to a religious identity in that way as well. So I have one word: no. That is totally a misunderstanding of the situation.
Thank you, everyone. I think the best way that I can think of for summarizing this discussion is one poem that he has, used in his chapter. And that I think that will really summarize the entire idea of the nature of his work and the nature of resistance that took place. So this poem was written at the very end of the 19th century in the context of a war, Gokprush War, by Mir Mehrab Khan Gichki, and he is trying to convince his fellow tribal men and maybe women to join resistance. So it's a translation, and it starts and says, Mehrab Khan asked the general population of Makran, Diwan Udho has stripped us from all grace and respect. We are left with no modesty, country, or bread and butter. We are left with no option than embracing death. Come, we should attack the coastal areas and compel the British to leave our land, drag them to Karachi coast and beyond Indus River. This will give us a name and fame, and people would praise us from London to Kandahar. Let us loot the British infidels. I think this poem gives us a very specific snapshot of the nature of resistance and the interaction that people in that region had with colonialism from the mid-19th century onwards. And this sentiment in this poem continues to kind of shape the nature of resistance even in contemporary Balochistan. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.